My billion-dollar deal was a done thing, a testament to my genius, until a man in a red hat walked in, completely unaware he was about to sign my checks, or tear them to shreds. The smell of roasted Colombian beans and my own success hung thick in the air. I swirled the last of my $12 macchiato in its ceramic cup, the foam clinging to the sides like a desperate prayer. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Gilded Bean, the city bustled, a concrete jungle I had conquered. My company, Innovatic Solutions, my brainchild, was on the verge of being acquired for a sum that would make kings blush. Today was the day. The final handshake. My victory lap. Across the small marble table, my COO, Chad, was practically vibrating with excitement. He adjusted his perfectly tailored blazer, a nervous tick I found both amusing and pathetic. "Can you believe it, Alex?" he whispered, his eyes wide. 10 figures. We're actually going to be 10-figure guys." I just smiled, a cool, practiced expression that conveyed effortless superiority. "We earned it, Chad. We disrupted. We innovated. Now we collect." I was feeling magnanimous. Life was perfect. The sun was shining. My suit cost more than the average car, and in a few hours my net worth would leap into the stratosphere. The buyer was a mysterious entity, a holding company called Patriot Holdings. Their identity had been kept under a ridiculously tight seal, but their offer was anything but subtle. They wanted my company, and they were willing to pay a premium that had my board of directors salivating. That's when the bell above the coffee shop door chimed, and he walked in. He was an anachronism, a creature from a completely different ecosystem. The man was probably in his late 60s, with a weather-beaten face and hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime with tools, not touchscreens. He wore worn-out work boots, jeans that had seen better decades, and a cheap, faded flannel shirt. But it was the hat that sucked all the air out of the room. It was a MAGA hat. A bright, garish, unapologetic slash of red in our sea, of muted progressive grays and blacks. Every head in the Gilded Bean turned. You could feel the collective sneer, the silent, synchronized judgment from the laptop-wielding screenwriters and the trust fund artists. It was an invasion. I couldn't help but let out a low chuckle. I nudged Chad. "Get a load of that," I murmured, gesturing with my chin. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn off the interstate and ended up in reality." Chad snorted, covering his mouth. "Does he even know where he is? Someone should tell him they don't serve lukewarm coffee from a gas station here." The man seemed oblivious to the daggers being stared into his back. He shuffled up to the counter, squinting at the menu board filled with artisanal pour-overs and single-origin espressos. "Just a black coffee, please," he said to the pierced green-haired barista. His voice was gravelly, simple. The barista looked at him with a mixture of pity and disdain, as if he'd just ordered a glass of mud. I leaned back in my chair, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. "Probably thinks venture capital is a new brand of fishing lure," I quipped to Chad, who nearly choked on his laughter. The man paid with a crumpled bill, took his plain white cup, and scanned the room. His eyes briefly met mine. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a calm, steady gaze. It was almost unnerving. He chose a small table by the window, directly in my line of sight. He sat down, took a slow sip of his coffee, and pulled out a phone. Not a sleek modern smartphone, but an ancient-looking flip phone. A dinosaur. This was too good. "A flip phone," I said, shaking my head in theatrical disbelief. "Chad, I think we're witnessing a genuine time traveler. He's probably going to use it to call his T-Rex." For the next 10 minutes we kept the quiet mockery going. Every time he took a sip of coffee, I'd mime disgust. When he checked his flip phone, I'd pretend to be amazed by the ancient technology. It was my little morning comedy routine, a perfect appetizer before the main course of my billion-dollar deal. I was the king of this world, and he was just a court jester who didn't even know he was wearing the costume. My own phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from my assistant, Sarah. "Mr. Sterling's car is arriving. He'll meet you in the Gilded Bean in 5 minutes." He wanted to keep it informal. My heart gave a little thump. Mr. Sterling. That was the name. The lead negotiator, and from what I gathered, the sole owner of Patriot Holdings. The man who was about to make me richer than God. "He's on his way," I told Chad, straightening my tie. Showtime. I scanned the entrance, expecting a titan of industry, a man in a Brioni suit flanked by assistants, radiating power. But the door remained closed. The minutes ticked by. I checked my watch, a flicker of annoyance starting to build. A man of his stature shouldn't be late. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. "He says he's already there. He's waiting for you." What? I frowned, my eyes sweeping across the coffee shop. I saw the screenwriters, the artists, the apathetic barista. There was no one here who even remotely looked like a billionaire buyer. My gaze drifted, and then it stopped. It landed on the man in the corner. The man with the worn-out jeans, the flannel shirt, and the bright red hat. He was looking right at me. He slowly lowered his flip phone, and a small, knowing smile crept across his lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed a third time. It was Sarah again. The message was short, and it made the blood drain from my face. He says to apologize for the delay. Mr. Sterling is the man in the red hat by the window. The world didn't just stop. It inverted. The rich aroma of coffee suddenly smelled like burnt tar. The quiet hum of the cafe became a deafening roar in my ears. My blood ran cold, then hot with a nauseating wave of shame. Every snide remark, every condescending chuckle from the past 10 minutes replayed in my mind, each one a nail in my own coffin. I looked at Chad. His face, usually tanned and smug, was the color of spoiled milk. His mouth hung slightly open, a perfect picture of a man watching his future burn to the ground. The man in the red hat. Mr. Sterling took another deliberate sip of his cheap coffee. He placed the cup down with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel. Then he stood up. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing, but as he started walking toward our table, he seemed to grow, to cast a shadow that consumed the entire room. My tailored suit felt like a cheap costume. My $12 macchiato felt like poison. He stopped at our table, his calm eyes flitting from my face to Chad's. The silence was thick, suffocating. He gestured to the empty chair. "Mind if I join you?" His gravelly voice was quiet, yet it cut through the cafe's ambience like a razor. "I believe this table is reserved for—" "What was it you said, Chad?" 10-figure guys." Chad flinched as if he'd been struck. I finally found my voice, but it came out as a strangled croak. "Mr. Sterling, I am so profoundly sorry. That was inexcusable. A terrible, unprofessional lapse in judgment. He held up a hand, and I fell silent immediately. He wasn't angry. He was something far worse, disappointed. He reached over and picked up my ornate little coffee cup, inspecting it as if it were a strange artifact. $12 for these, he said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. You know, Alex, my first company, I built it on coffee that cost 50 cents a cup from a rusty old thermos. But it was honest coffee. Brewed for men who were about to do an honest day's work. He placed the cup back on the saucer, his gaze never leaving mine. I find that things and people are usually better when they're honest. My throat was bone dry. I wanted the marble floor to swallow me whole. He then pulled out the flip phone. He didn't open it. He just held it in his calloused palm. "You were right to laugh at this old thing," he said, a hint of something that wasn't quite amusement in his voice. "It can't order me a car or show me pictures of what some influencer had for breakfast, but it doesn't distract me. It lets me focus on what's real. People, for instance. I like to watch people, see who they really are when they think no one of consequence is looking." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing my ego, deflating my entire sense of self. He had heard everything, every single word. "I was prepared to sign the papers this morning, Alex," he continued, his tone shifting from observational to clinical. "Pay you and your board a generous, some might say obscene, amount of money for Innovatech. I like your numbers. The company is lean, aggressive, profitable. But a business is more than a balance sheet. It's built on character. Its foundation is respect. And you've just given me a very illuminating demonstration of yours. Please, Mr. Sterling," I begged, the last vestiges of my pride crumbling into dust. "It was a stupid joke, a moment of arrogance. It doesn't reflect the values of my company." "Oh, I think it does," he countered smoothly. "I think it reflects them perfectly. You see a hat, and you see a political cartoon. You see work boots, and you see a punchline. You don't see the man who built a logistics empire from a single rusty truck. You don't see the person who signs the checks that could change your life forever. You only see what you want to see. And that, son, is a fatal flaw in any leader." He leaned back slightly. I braced myself for the killing blow, for him to stand up and walk away, the deal dead, my reputation in ruins. "So," he said, and my heart hammered against my ribs, "the deal isn't off. A tiny, insane spark of hope ignited in my chest. Chad let out a breath he must have been holding for a full minute. Maybe I could fix this. Maybe. But the price has changed, Mr. Sterling stated flatly. The spark of hope died instantly. The 10-figure offer is off the table. My new offer is $5 billion. Not a penny more. $5 billion. He'd cut the price in half. My mind reeled. It was still a fortune, an unimaginable sum of money. But it was a $5 billion slap in the face. It was a public castration. The board would be furious. But what choice did I have? I understand, I stammered, my mind racing, trying to calculate, to salvage. Good, he said, because there's one more condition. He reached up, slowly took off the red MAGA hat, and placed it on the center of the table between us. The bold white letters seemed to mock me. The signing won't be in a boardroom with your high-priced lawyers, he said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. It'll be tomorrow afternoon. You'll come alone to the annual company picnic for my logistics firm, and for the first 2 hours you will wear this hat. You will stand behind the grill, you will serve hot dogs to my drivers and mechanics, and you will thank every single one of them for their hard work. You'll do it with a smile. After you've shown my people the respect you couldn't show me then, and only then, we'll sign your $5 billion contract. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. So, Alex, tell me, how badly do you want to be a figure guy? The next 24 hours were a private hell. I had to call an emergency board meeting where I spun a sanitized version of the events, framing Sterling's new terms as an unconventional but ultimately shrewd test of character. I didn't mention the hat. That detail was too humiliating, a bridge too far for men who measured their worth in stock options and golf handicaps. They were livid about the price cut, but $5 billion is still $5 billion. After hours of agonizing debate, they reluctantly agreed, leaving me to be the sacrificial lamb at Sterling's altar. The company picnic was held in a sprawling public park that smelled of freshly cut grass, charcoal, and diesel fumes. There were no marble tables or minimalist decor here, just hundreds of picnic tables, bouncy castles for the kids, and a massive American flag fluttering from a temporary flagpole. Everywhere I looked, I saw people who looked like Mr. Sterling, men and women with calloused hands, sun-creased faces, and an easygoing camaraderie that felt completely alien to my world of cutthroat boardrooms and passive-aggressive emails. As promised, Mr. Sterling, or Frank, as he insisted I call him, was waiting for me by a row of industrial-sized grills. He was wearing the same flannel shirt, but he'd swapped the red hat for a simple baseball cap that said Sterling Logistics. He handed me a crisp, new MAGA hat and a long white apron. Glad you could make it, Alex, he said, his expression unreadable. The burgers are over there. The hot dogs are here. Don't burn 'em. For the next 2 hours, I lived a life I had only ever looked down on. The red hat felt like it was physically burning into my scalp, a scarlet letter for my arrogance. At first, every interaction was excruciating. A large bearded man named Gus clapped me on the shoulder, leaving a greasy handprint on my apron. Hey, new guy, another dog over here. Well done. I forced a smile, my teeth grinding. A young woman with grease under her fingernails asked me about my day, and I mumbled something about spreadsheets, which earned me a confused look. But then something started to shift. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, shyly asked me for a hot dog with extra ketchup. Her smile, when I handed it to her, was so genuine and bright it caught me off guard. An older man, who told me he'd been driving for Frank for 30 years, started telling me stories about the early days, about sleeping in his truck and building the company from the ground up with Frank by his side. He spoke of Frank not as a billionaire CEO, but as a loyal friend who'd personally paid for his wife's cancer treatments. I started listening. Really listening. I wasn't Alex, the tech CEO, anymore. I was just the guy in the hat, flipping burgers. These people weren't political cartoons. They were parents, veterans, grandparents. They talked about their mortgages, their kids' college funds, their leaky transmissions. They were the invisible gears of the economy, the very people whose lives my disruptive innovations so often threatened to upend without a second thought. My derision in that coffee shop wasn't just about a hat, it was a deep-seated contempt for a world I didn't understand and had never bothered to. As the 2 hours drew to a close, Frank appeared by my side holding 2 bottles of water. He handed one to me. You burn a few, he said with a wry smile, but you learn fast. I took off the hat and wiped the sweat from my brow. It felt like I was shedding a skin. They're good people, Frank, I said, my voice hoarse. It was the truest thing I'd said in years. He nodded, looking out at his employees. They're the best people. They're the foundation. The balance sheet is just the roof. A house with no foundation won't stand for long, no matter how fancy the roof is. He looked back at me, his gaze piercing. You get that now, don't you? Yes, I said. I do. We walked over to an empty picnic table, away from the crowd. He pulled a folder from a simple canvas bag and laid it on the table. It was the contract. He handed me a pen. $5 billion, he said. The offer stands. I looked at the contract, the culmination of my life's work. The number, which once seemed like the only thing that mattered, now felt smaller, less significant than the stories I'd heard and the people I'd met in the last 2 hours. An idea, insane and terrifying, began to form in my mind. It was a leap of faith, a rejection of the person I had been yesterday morning. I slid the unsigned contract back across the table to him. No, I said. Frank raised an eyebrow. No? Keep the $5 billion, I said, my heart pounding. I want to counteroffer. I'll sell you 49% of Innovatech for $1. You become an active partner. I stay on as CEO. I want to learn how to build a company like yours, a company with a foundation. For the first time, Frank Sterling looked genuinely shocked. He stared at me for a long moment, his face a mixture of disbelief and something I couldn't quite place. Was it respect? He finally broke into a slow, wide grin. It transformed his entire face, erasing the hard lines and revealing the man his employees all loved. You know, Alex, he said, letting out a deep chuckle. I was hoping you'd say something like that. He picked up the pen, crossed out the purchase price on the contract, and scribbled in the new terms himself. Because a roof like yours, combined with a foundation like mine, we're not just going to build a company, we're going to build an empire. He slid the amended contract back to me. Welcome aboard, partner.